know that we've got democracy out here, but something else is happening in there. Something far more nefarious. You guys thirsty up there?
Here in Pennsylvania, it's a sad day because we've got a government that is a wholly owned subsidiary of the gas industry at this point. Now you have an industry that's across the street campaigning with Governor Corbett and with Michael Krancer, the Secretary of the DEP, the Secretary of the Department of Environmental Protection. The people who are supposed to be protecting Pennsylvanians from harm of industry are over in the gas industry convention talking about how great they are. Now that's a takeover of our government.
When it comes to fracking, it's hard to see daylight between the two biggest political parties in the United States.
Natural gas isn't just appearing magically, we're encouraging it and working with the industry.
This has not been Mr. Oil or Mr. Gas or Mr. Coal. I'll get America and North America energy independent. I'll do it by more drilling, more permits and licenses.
We've got potentially 600,000 jobs and 100 years worth of energy right beneath our feet with natural gas. And we can do it in an environmentally sound way.
Both Republicans and Democrats say fracking is needed until cleaner energy like wind and solar becomes cost efficient.
Using shale gas as a so-called bridge fuel is foolish nonsense. It's not a transition, it's a walk the plank. We got about 30 years to drastically decrease the use of all fossil fuels. And what the gas industry wants us to believe is we ought to speed up the use of one fossil fuel, accelerate towards that wall, and then put the brakes on at the last minute. Sorry, that doesn't work for me.
For decades, Professor Tony Ingraffia did research and development for the oil and gas industry. But in 2011, he and a colleague published a study which found that natural gas produced from unconventional sources like shale actually emits more greenhouse gases than coal. The industry hit back, launching an online campaign to discredit him and his study. The group was called America's Natural Gas Alliance.
How many times have we seen a science question be manhandled by the industry that's the culprit? And they produce pseudoscience to cast doubt on what's coming out in peer reviews. The average person on the street is going to say, well, ANGA, the American National Gas Alliance, said people at Cornell are wrong. Well, maybe they are. End of story. We just killed science.
America's Natural Gas Alliance is not the only group to have attacked Ingraffia's study. The Independent Petroleum Association of America started its own online information campaign in 2009 named Energy in Depth, or EID. It was first funded by companies like BP, Shell, and Halliburton to fight new environmental regulations on fracking. We went to speak to EID.
Tony Ingraffia, Cornell University. The quote on your website is that he's more worthy of a Greenpeace activist than an Ivy League faculty member. Is that something you would stand by?
If it's on our website, then sure.
This seems to be anyone who steps up. If you have bad water and you say something in the press, if you're an academic, if you're a scientist, if you're a doctor, EID will go after you.
That's not true. That's not true. What Energy in Depth does is when there are allegations that are made or research that is done that is either mistaken or perhaps biased, we point out those mistakes, we point out those biases.
The frenzy over the Marcellus Shale doesn't stop at the Pennsylvania border. Gas companies are now looking north to the state of New York. But the state government here has put the brakes on fracking. For now.
Pennsylvania has opened its doors to fracking, almost in an unregulated Wild West kind of way, and we're shocked and horrified. And we have decided to have a moratorium. So for 4 years we have forbidden fracking in New York, and as we assess the environmental and health risks.
Still, it seems as if it's a matter of when, not if, fracking comes to New York. The state's governor, Andrew Cuomo, is reportedly considering lifting the moratorium in 5 counties. And even one of the largest environmental groups in the U.S. has been working with the gas industry and pro-fracking state officials.
Hydraulic fracturing is already a reality in the United States, so to say, well, we have to stop it when it's clearly happening, I think perhaps unrealistic is perhaps the better word to use. We think it's unrealistic to expect that we're going to put this genie back in the bottle.
L.G. Holstein is from the Environmental Defense Fund, one of the staunchest green groups in American history. This year, the fund accepted $6 million from New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg for work on fracking.
From the environmental community's standpoint, what we want to do is to keep the doors open for collaboration with the states. We want to help share best practices, and for that, we're delighted to be working closely with the industry to help formulate those things, those kinds of environmental practices, safeguards, if you will.
I think the mainstream environmental movement is asleep at the switch here, and they've forgotten their mandate. Now they are working on hand in glove with the fossil fuel industry to try to build a safer cigarette, namely to make fracking somehow safer. In my view, there is no evidence to suggest that can be done. I challenge EDF to show me that evidence.
In New York, we visited a vigil for Susan Walker, one of 3 protesters arrested for trespassing at the site of a planned gas storage facility on Seneca Lake. She was sentenced to 15 days in prison.
It's as American as apple pie to go out when you're not being heard by the powers that be, to shed some light on some injustice. The infrastructure for hydrofracking is being built on the western shore of Seneca Lake even as we speak. I happen to be a registered Republican. No, it's not left, it's not right, it's just right and it's wrong.
It's not clear if the anti-fracking movement can hold up the barricades in New York for much longer, no matter how much noise they make. Fracking is being presented by the energy industry and by many politicians as a simple, stark choice.
One of those choices is these 2 wars that have been fought to maintain a certain stability in the Middle East so that petroleum can continue to flow, or domestic production at the sacrifice of people around Dimick who have themselves felt put upon.
But the very concept of energy independence, in a world where the market is global and where energy is both bought and sold by the United States, is misleading. It's a useful catchphrase and a political slogan that allows both the industry and politicians to avoid making real and expensive decisions and take a leading role in moving beyond fossil fuels.
There are moments in history when our political leaders decide it's time to rise up and be the leader for a grassroots movement. We're still blasting fossilized animals and plants out of the ground and lighting them on fire. It's a Neanderthal, 19th century, brutal, destructive, toxic process, and it's killing us and it's killing the planet.